Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite. I am joined, as always, by the illustrious, if exasperated, Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and what for a wonderful day we're having today. You sound a little downcast today. Why is that?
Oh my goodness, it's almost like the youth, the exuberance has infected my co-host as well. Just discussing off-air about... It's been a very long day, I think, for both of us.
I don't think, ladies and gentlemen, he quite expected that reaction.
I certainly didn't, but it was nonetheless very much appreciated. I can see JP has already sent in a message saying, "Start on time, you shits." No, thanks, man. We tried our best. I did schedule it
It's always nice to be appreciated, is it not?
I know. I did start the timer for 2035, but I thought we'd turn up a couple minutes early on that account.
But I must now immediately segue into something, given that we are such a duo on this particular live stream.
Some might even say dynamic. Go on.
Oh yes, very much so. Because Kathy K and what's he called? Christian Fraser, I think. I mispronounce it, I think.
Frazier.
Fraser. The two of them are today on BBC News, and they are presenting BBC News live from the Iowa caucus for the Democrats.
Oh right, yes, in America.
And they are, I mean, on Twitter I said they are like spring lambs, excitable and joyous, bounding about, particularly Katty K.
And
which she can basically contain. She can barely contain her joy.
And completely wet behind the ears, perhaps?
The thing is, I would just like people to contrast that with the very same presenter couple's presentation of Brexit Day.
Yes.
Which was funereal in its sentiment, if you know what I mean.
Oh, well, aside from the fact that the BBC, Sky News UK, and ITV all decided to deck out their studios in yellow and blue.
Well, I think the yellow and blue thing, I think that was for Newsnight, because I didn't see the Newsnight thing. I was just on the BBC News channel. There wasn't a blue and yellow galore set as far as I could tell, if you know what I mean.
Oh,
but it was just wonderful. Do you remember Rachel Maddow?
Yeah, certainly.
When the Trump election result was declared.
Yes, she gave a very disheartened speech and nearly broke down and cried on TV.
Precisely. That was pretty much the look on the face of Katty K and Christian Fraser.
Amazing.
I mean, it was just staggering how they managed to project just abject misery for hours on the BBC News channel. And then today, they're among their people, they're among Democrats at the Iowa caucus. And the contrast could not be more stark. It's just unreal. And it's just so funny that at the same time as this display is basically there, that basically, this we like. This is effectively what the BBC is telling us. This we like, that we didn't. At the same time as they're doing that, they're also announcing that the BBC licence fee is going up.
Yeah, funny that.
So, yes, you have to see the funny side here. I mean, there's comedic value in this. But yes, I couldn't quite believe my eyes as I was kind of sitting there watching television, and Katty K is just beaming, just absolutely beaming with joy. And this is the same Katty K that looked as if she was sucking a lemon on Brexit Day.
Indeed. Do you know what I noticed, actually? The greatest difference I noticed in coverage for kind of the Brexit Day, Independence Day thing was Sky News Australia. Did you see that clip?
No, I did not. No.
Sky News...
I could imagine they would be quite favourable.
the Sky News Australia is bizarre because they appear to be genuinely, I guess, say you could either say that they were much more to the centre. Some have characterised them as more right wing than Sky News UK, and Sky News UK being another leftist shill, as far as I'm concerned. And but yeah, they were really quite. The UK one was quite subdued on the day, whereas Sky News Australia was saying things like, "I think the UK is going to just explode with prosperity after this. For the British people, it's going to be a marvellous thing." And you know, they're going on about how old Nigel Farage, maybe he'll get a peerage. He's the one who's really made this all happen. And just a weird kind of weird from our perspective, because it was an infectious, energetic, exuberant, and positive take on Brexit, which I have never seen from, shall we call it, local news, insofar as it can be described as such.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, I think when it comes to, I mean, I would, from what I've seen of Australian Sky News, I would say they are sort of more towards Fox News territory. So I would say they're more than centrist. They're more to the right.
Fair enough.
But yes, I mean, clearly they would be, you know, they would be favourable towards Brexit. The idea of the sort of the explosion of prosperity, well, that's what we will have to wait and see, really. I still say when it comes to Brexit, there is a short term and there is a long term game. I think when it comes to short term, I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that it's going to be a sort of short term gain.
Oh, indeed.
I think if anything, there is going to be a short term setback, particularly given the EU's attitude. I'm assuming that you once again, managed to miss watching The Week That Was, which is, of course, essential viewing for everybody.
Oh, I never watched that crap. No, I can't stand the guy who produces it.
Precisely, yes, I know, terrible fella.
And so biased as well. Just
no, because I did have a thing or two to say about the EU on this one, because I have been, well, how shall we say, quite strongly negatively surprised by the EU attitude over this. I think the EU are almost suicidal in their determination to get it wrong in this case.
What have they said? What have I missed?
Oh, well, there was a Guardian article that basically said that the EU has now announced this pretty much came on the back of first saying, "Oh, we're so sorry you're leaving. Of course, you remain close to our hearts.
Oh
and
yes,
sorry to leave you." And
they lit up Brussels, one of the squares in Brussels.
Yeah, we hope you will be rejoining us again, and let's sing Auld Lang Syne together. So right at the back of that, we then get EU has announced that it will be siding with Spain regarding its territorial claim for Gibraltar, and will hence be insisting on Gibraltar being excluded from any from any of the actual trade talks, so that the Spanish will be at liberty to close the border and besiege Gibraltar whenever they feel like it.
They really are spiteful twats, aren't they? Sometimes.
And you just kind of read that and you just went, "What happened to all this friendship malarkey?" And
yes.
To
in
me,
the spirit of
yeah, all the spirit of goodwill and whatever. Yes. And this is where I just feel, because I've mentioned it once or twice before in, you know, the run up to Brexit, and particularly the way they twisted Theresa May's arm further and further and further. Well, fine, she let them, but they did twist. I felt that they were arguing in bad faith. I think in this particular case, they've overstepped the mark, because this is now a matter of territorial sovereignty. But at the same time, do you recall the BBC, the EU, asking Britain to respect the internal affairs of the EU while it was still a member?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall that?
Mm-hmm.
that basically, please don't do a Margaret Thatcher on us. Because if you
Yes.
remember when Margaret Thatcher, way back when, wanted her rebate, and they were all sort of glad-handing her and saying, oh, well, no, of course we will look into it, but just not now,
There will be
perhaps
an
at the next
inquiry,
meeting.
and in the fullness of time,
In the fullness
Britisher.
of time, yes, Sir Humphrey came to the
At the
fore.
at the end
Um,
of, at the
at
end
the
of the
end of the day.
day, in the
Um,
fullness of time.
so what Thatcher did is she started vetoing everything. So whether it was related to rebate or not,
Yeah,
she just basically threw a spanner into the works and says, Britain says no.
and nothing could be done because it only
Nothing
takes a
could be done,
single veto.
nothing could move. And that's what they were afraid of Britain doing. If and therefore they sort of said, look, in the spirit of good faith, given that we're supposed to negotiate this stuff, please don't do that. And what did the UK do? We were civil. We said, okay, no, yes, we understand. We're not going to do that. No sooner are we out. Oh, by the way, we're backing Spain on the territorial claim for Gibraltar.
Oh, and you don't happen to have any MEPs. Oh, you can't do anything about this anyway. Oh, you just have to roll over and take it, don't you? Oh, what a shame.
How shall we say? I think you know that I have a thing about the use of language.
Yes.
I'm not one of the people who swears and shouts angrily on his, on his contributions. But even I thought it was appropriate to refer to them as nothing other than scumbags on that particular occasion.
Are you sure, Britisher? It's very unlike you to use a word as strong as scum.
Well, how shall we say? How else do you describe this? This is, as I say, this is not negotiating in good faith. So basically, you ask the other side, okay, look, can we keep things civil? Can we just, rather than just getting into trench warfare, can we deal with this like grown-ups? Okay, yes, no problem. We'll do it that way.
Not to mention, of course, that they are so scared of people following suit, of nations following suit, I should say.
Yeah.
That Guy Verhofstadt is accelerating his rhetoric for the, if Britain has shown us anything, it is that the EU needs reform.
And therefore, yes.
And therefore it should be reformed. For no opt-outs, no opt-ins, a unified Europe with a unified constitution standardized across the board.
This is precisely where I start talking of suicidal attitude. Europe, in a way, has to look two ways on this. So, in one way, I fully understand. They are paranoid about the fact that Britain might actually make a go of this. So the last thing they want is, Singapore on sea off the coast of France. So I understand that side of things. But, on the other hand, if they try their best somehow to hamstring and cripple the British economy as best as they possibly can, then all they're doing is telling every member state, this is what we'll do to you if you leave.
Yeah.
Now,
it's about setting an example.
It's no longer a voluntary club, and particularly in Eastern Europe, that's what they're terrified of, because it's within living memory that they were part of the Warsaw Pact.
Less than 40 years ago, yeah.
And therefore, that's what I mean with suicidal. They might be creating a rebellion, and the tone the EU is taking. I mean, I don't know what they're like with Norway. I remember seeing some headlines regarding Switzerland. I mean, obviously you have to pick your examples, because it's very difficult to find anybody in Europe these days that isn't part of the EU.
Yes. Exactly as per design.
Yes, yeah. The Swiss, obviously, they are militantly neutral, if you know what I mean. So they like having their, United Nations base in Geneva and being sort of the diplomatic hub in case of crises and things like that. So they're completely neutral. They want to stay out of everything. So they also don't want to be part of the EU. But of course, these days they're surrounded by them. So with Switzerland having quite an economy,
Yeah.
they need to be able to deal with their neighbours. So the EU sort of feels, oh, well, they've got Switzerland over a barrel. So they stipulated certain things they wanted in order to deal with the Swiss. And one of these things, for example, is the Swiss also have to accept freedom of movement, which they don't like, because they're a small country, a
Yeah.
very, very small country. And they have seen a bit of an immigration explosion because they're a very wealthy country. But there was one particular thing that the Europeans wanted. There was a project that the Swiss were playing around with. But it was more sort of, blue sky thinking rather than anything else. And then the Europeans decided, oh, no, 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 you're going to do this. It's one of our conditions for dealing with you.
Yep, yep.
I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called the base tunnel.
Yeah, vaguely.
It is one of the engineering achievements of the world. I mean, you've heard of Crossrail.
Yeah,
I believe
yeah,
Crossrail is now the biggest building site in Europe. That's if you discount the fusion reactor they're building in France. That's also vying for that position. But prior to that, the biggest building site in Europe was the base tunnel in Switzerland.
Right.
Now, you have to understand that previously what one had to do in order to get through, to get from Germany to Italy,
Mountains.
is you had to, in a way, wind your way up the mountain until the mountain was sufficiently thin enough to be able to drill a tunnel through it. And then
Yeah.
you had to wind your way down the mountain again.
And the project was to make an enormous tunnel, wasn't it?
Yes. So the base of the mountain. Let's go through the base of the mountain. So there's no winding involved. So we can then send high-speed trains through. Well, of course, what we can then also send through are goods trains. That's what Europe was interested in. So, oh, no, we want this connection. So like that, we can connect in a way, Munich and Milan will take hours off journey times. This is what Europe wants. You will build this. It's part of the conditions for our having a trade agreement with you.
Yeah.
So the Swiss basically said, oh, well, if that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do. As far as the Swiss themselves are concerned, they haven't really got that much territory south of the Alps, so it's not really worth that bigger infrastructure project, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
But anyway, they fulfilled their condition. They did it. Well, guess what? Since then, the EU have come back with more conditions. So the Swiss have built the tunnel. So thinking that, oh, well, this was the price of actually, having these trade deals. Oh, no. That was the price then.
No, that was the price of a piece of string, which attached to many more pieces of string, which attached to yet more pieces of string.
So you can really be truly proud of yourself. You've done very well, little boy. You've dug the longest tunnel on Earth through granite. Well done. We're glad we didn't have to do that. But now,
Bend over.
Now our latest demand is that you is what was it? Yes, regulations. Any new EU regulations must automatically be adopted into Swiss law without Parliament having to pass any decision or without the decision going to the people.
Do not question the EU!
Yes, because Switzerland, of course, is famed for its direct democracy.
Yeah.
So, they have referenda on a lot of things. Oh, no. This will not be subject to this. If we change regulations, you will automatically adopt it into Swiss law, and that's that. So the Swiss are looking at this going, hang on a moment. We are proud of our direct democracy. We have had direct democracy in this country longer than the Germans have had democracy per se.
Yeah.
And yet now we are basically being told we have to change this. Well, on top of that, and I remember this was a Telegraph article, I believe, or was it the Express? I'm not sure. There was then also talk where some ministers came out, some Swiss ministers came out and said, we are being told by the EU not to negotiate with the British.
Oh, yeah, because that would be such a terrible, awful thing.
So what the Swiss, I think the Swiss basically got their backs up over that. So they couldn't do a trade deal with the British because until Brexit Day, we weren't allowed to do any trade deals, which was ridiculous. But
Look, all we need the Swiss to do.
What the Swiss did is they came to some kind of memorandum of understanding that we will have a trade deal, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
they did a trade deal with the British without there being a trade deal.
Oh,
I think the same thing was also done with Norway.
This is not a trade deal. This is merely a trade agreement.
Yes, this is an agreement to have a trade deal, that sort of thing.
I insist immediately that the Swiss pile up trainloads of Toblerone, which have been packed not with nougat but with plastic explosive, and send it at high speed to the heart of Brussels immediately.
Just as long as they don't have to send it to that bloody tunnel they've spent that many years digging.
Indeed. Yeah. The EU knows, and it must know, that it has two options, because Britain, I think, like it or not for them, even if it goes through what you might call like a dimple as it establishes these new trade deals, the keenness from America will keep Britain afloat regardless, even if provided we negotiate well enough as well. You've also got the opportunities to do things with places like Singapore and Australia and more, and all those sorts of places. So Britain, especially with its historic idea, and I think currently with Boris at the helm, is quite likely to do well out of this, even if there's some consternation at the beginning. But the point is, the EU has its two options. The first is it can lie back and accept that as soon as Britain does this, most of the eastern bloc of Europe will leave them, because they've already been unrest. There's already been dissent over there. As I can see, some people in chat, an Architect of Fate has sent in that there's a new Dutch poll that says over 50% now want to leave the EU, and it suggests that Hungary or Poland will follow next. I've not forgotten about you, little Aotearoa. We'll get to you later, and you, Scoan. But this I think it would be a snowball effect, especially if France kicks off, because I think France would be the black sheep in this regard, especially if they end up getting the guillotine out for Macron.
If France leaves the EU, if France were to leave the EU is over. I mean, that's a given.
Yeah.
Basically, the EU consists effectively, without the British in it, the EU consists of France and Germany.
Absolutely.
So the moment the French leave,
the whole project falls apart.
The EU then becomes a project of Germany and its satellite states. So that then seriously questions every other state's sovereignty, if you know what I mean.
I was loving the coverage from by loving, this is pure sarcasm, right? The coverage from the BBC and Sky and ITV, which was saying things very negatively about Britain's relationship with the EU, as well as discussing, what a great blight it was on international cooperation between nations, right? And someone kindly pointed out on Twitter, it's like, well, all the other nations in Europe who are not a part of the European Union, who have trade relationships with the European Union or who negotiate with it, places like the Swiss, places like is it the Netherlands, and the Vatican.
The Netherlands are full members.
Okay, sorry, my bad. I'm thinking of another country up in that region, and the Vatican as well. Vatican City is not part of the European Union. Clearly, they are godless monsters. I mean, that goes without saying, but we'll see. And just the absolute vitriol which is directed towards Britain exclusively, that drives me insane. You know what I mean?
I am fully on board with that. I'm just trying to see whether I can find this headline. Because yes, there was one particular headline that just tickled me, and I'm desperately trying to find this thing. And of course, I'm trying to talk whilst looking for this at the same time, which never works. But yeah, there was one particular headline from the New Statesman of sort of, I can't find it right now, but it was something along the lines of, Brexit Day is nothing to be celebrated. It is a moment of profound shame. I mean,
yeah, for you, but not for 52% of the country who voted. It is a triumph of democracy, and it is a triumph of policy that has come about.
This is one of the things that I've been trying to get across to people for some time, and that is, it's not just a triumph for democracy. It's a necessity for democracy,
and it is the protection of democracy. Yes.
Yes, precisely. Imagine if it would not have happened. Imagine if the Remainers would have managed to scupper it. What would that mean? What would it actually mean for democracy? And
well, it sets precedent.
Yes, precisely. But imagine one would have taken on board some of the argumentation by those Remainers. People weren't educated enough. People were ignorant.
Nobody had all the facts.
Precisely. So what does this mean? So who is educated enough? Who has the facts? Do you understand what I mean? So this, to my mind, this was an open ideological assault on the working classes. And that, to me, was just, that was just abject. It was just hideous. That in that regard, there was a parallel to it on, I don't know whether you saw that incident on CNN with Don Lemon laughing at these other two folks making jokes about stupid Trump supporters.
Oh, right. Go on.
There is this deep disdain that some on the left these days seem to feel towards the people who would traditionally be their supporters.
It's not just disdain, it's utter disgust. The absolute derision with which the common man is treated. It absolutely infuriates me.
And I think somewhere at the heart of it is a sense of superiority that is that's entirely artificial, that's come about by, well, you see, I went to university, I've got a degree. And you just go, well, good for you. But I'm not sure your sociology degree really sets you above the person who, I don't know, is a trained electrician and has got a family of 3 children and a dog at home that he's keeping in porridge.
Absolutely.
Just in what way exactly are you so bloody superior?
This is with the obviously we abolished the Polytechnic some time ago and that sort of thing, and even obviously at the time they weren't particularly well regarded, but ever since then, even the treatment of the tradesman, the tradesperson, as the modernists would say, right? The tradespeople who go out there and do all the jobs and all of the work which keeps this country afloat, and the dismissal of their understanding, even if it's an implicit understanding of the way in which their communities and their workplaces work, was disgusting.
Well, it's, how shall we say, to me, it's the attitude that says, I demand that cleaning lady come and clean the offices, the posh offices in which I work in central London. I demand that the binmen come and empty my bins. But I don't think they ought to have a vote. That's what it really means.
Yeah. Those little people down there, they don't really understand international affairs. It's like, but it wasn't. This wasn't even a vote about international affairs. It was a vote
Of
about.
course,
It was a vote
because I studied women's studies at university.
But I mean, it wasn't just women's studies. There are plenty of people out there who are engineers, who work in the STEM fields, etc., who have a similar thing. But they all receive a very sheltered, a very protected, and a very should we call it an intellectual academic upbringing through the system, and they never get to interact with what they regard as the dregs of society, right? The common people, and also the interactions of what the common people from other nations happen to be. All they get as interactions from other countries, like from India, for instance, is the Brahmin tier rich kids who get to come across and take classes at Oxford, Cambridge, or whatever other university that you happen to pick out.
What you are saying is that the Thunderfoots and the academic agents only really ever get to meet the other Thunderfoots and academic agents from other countries. Yes, absolutely.
And this fosters this thing because they're all kind of the same age, of the same a similar type of mentality, and all moving, preferably, aside from some of the UK kids, towards a common goal. They've either been driven there because they're paying an exorbitant amount of money, because their parents are driving them there, and they've had to make not necessarily a sacrifice, but they've had to make a big shift in moving country to come study. Now, the British kids don't have a similar thing. And so what you end up with is this kind of, despite the fact that they constantly crow about diversity, it's actually remarkably homogenous in its, what's the word I'm looking for? Ignorance of wider affairs. Raise the voting age to 25 anyway. But there we go. And we have a huge problem. My dad used to work in insurance before his accident, and what he would constantly say is, he's like, the worst people to hire are graduates, because they come out of university believing that they know the entire world. And I'm sure I'll come out of there and I'll have preconceptions and I'll have to realter my worldview when I come out, because I will have been away from the real world for too long. But I at least have the memories of when I worked in the real world before I had to go back into education, you know?
I fully understand what you mean, but I think there is a certain toxicity. There is something that's got into the system on the left, and we're seeing it in full flow on Twitter. You know, when it comes to did you see the one that there was somebody who put up a picture earlier this evening of the gates of Auschwitz? Arbeit macht frei.
I saw it in passing, but just catch us up for it.
And then just basically referred to, all Brexiteers are Nazis.
Well, you could go, like, you have a message for that person. You could take that opinion, you could ball it up, and you could shove it so far up your ass that it never comes out again.
And you just go, really? This is Auschwitz. This is a death camp.
The symbol of one of the greatest atrocities Europe ever saw. Yes.
And you're putting that up and saying, here we are, this is the Brexiteers, you know. And this is what I mean. There is something there. There is something visceral. There is something nasty. And that it's particularly targeted.
Kinder, gentler politics, Britisher.
It's, indeed. It's particularly targeted at those people who one owns by right. So, those hicks in America who work down coal mines and steel works, or have been laid off at steel works and things like that. They are owned by the Democrat Party. They don't go voting for Trump. And the people of Stoke and Blythe Valley, and various other places up north, they are owned by the Labour Party. They don't go voting for Brexit. They don't go voting for Boris Johnson. That's disgusting. That's fascist. That's nasty. And you just go,
Never. I've yet to hear the phrase, the term fascist applied to me by anyone other than someone with a distinct and clear misunderstanding of the doctrine of fascism.
well, the one thing I couldn't help but ask that person who I haven't checked my Twitter since. You'll have to forgive me. I just went on to retweet the message that we were doing
We're
the
heading
live
on.
stream.
Yep.
Yeah. The one thing I had to ask this person was, well, Brexit Day has happened. Where are the concentration camps?
Yes, we got up this morning to find that there were not animals loose in the street, having wrestled themselves free from their bonds.
That have been disappeared and have been rounded up.
Yes. Where are the stormtroopers?
It's just, I don't know. I just sometimes I kind of despair at the way that some people present this. But yes, the fascist thing, particularly when you're combining it with a picture of the gates of Auschwitz, I just think, okay, now you've overstepped the mark. But yeah,
sold themselves free from their bonds.
It's difficult to get your head around this, but it's particularly this disdain that is you voted against us, so we hate you. But aside from that, there is something else, and it's only coming to the fore because they now wish to express that they hate them. Previously, they didn't have to do it because they were always on side, if you know what I mean. And now suddenly it is, oh, well, you're uneducated. You're stupid. You're thick.
Oh, yes, hashtag thick was trending, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, I remember seeing that too, yes. And you just sort of think, well, that's just remarkable. Because, however I think of people with whom I disagree politically, that's not really my automatic go-to. Oh, well, they must be stupid. They can't be as well educated as me. Do you understand what I mean? That's to me, that's just a bizarre reaction, but it shows a certain arrogance that has been bred into these people.
Absolutely,
because they've got a piece of paper on the wall,
and it doesn't take a genius to understand the concept of control of your nation either, which is what principally this was about. I'm just going to catch us up with a few super chats. I don't want to get too far behind things. Lil Aotearoa says, you guys seen the Milford Sound flooding in New Zealand? Several hundred to be evacuated by air because all the roads have been destroyed. More heavy rain to come. Sad face. I haven't. Have you heard this, Britisher?
I have not heard about that, but that sounds quite serious.
It does. I really hope that they get the help. If there is a GoFundMe or or some sort of crowdfunding or an appeal or something like that, please feel free to link me on Twitter. I will do my best to promote that. Because we need to look out for our New Zealand cousins from time to time, it seems.
Well, we'll need to get our butter from somewhere, won't we?
Absolutely. And a lamb, apparently. Sutskoen says 169 seconds late, presumably. I thought the military would teach you something about showing up on time, winky face. But I think you'll find that we scheduled this stream for 25 to 9 this time, and that we actually ended up being 2 minutes early. So there, take that, Sutskoen.
Aside from that, when it comes to warfare and whatever, do things ever start on time?
Well, the idea is that we should aim to be above that sort of thing, Britisher. We need the military timekeeping, and he is right in that regard. Architect of Fate says, thoughts on the new Dutch poll? Yes, we already covered that. Makuta Deradak says, did you notice the symbolic significance of the portrait of King Henry VIII behind Boris Johnson in the pictures of him in number 10? It's the most fitting portrait, harkening back to our first Brexit from the continent. I love the symbolism. Yes. Similarly, he gave his speech in Greenwich Chapel, the Painted Hall, which is only about 200 feet from where I was sitting this morning, actually. But infuriatingly, I had to go to a lecture instead of being able to attend that particular speech. But I believe that the painting on the roof there from 1707 had a similar significance. Any other comments on that, Britisher?
I had something to say, but I've completely lost my thread. Apologies.
Fair
Moving
enough.
on.
Sutgoen says, wanting to send heavy metallic aerodynamic objects at high speed to Brussels, you say? Would I dare say something so brazen, Sutgoen?
I have still said it shouldn't be any high-speed metallic objects, yada yada. We should load up the Lancaster with sprouts
And dump them.
and dump them over Brussels, and then just turn around, fly back home, and then just leave it there as a kind of political riddle.
Now, when you say Brussels sprouts, Britisher, do you mean asphalt melting firebombs of the like of which have not been seen since Dresden?
No. I am indeed talking of actual sprouts.
Shame.
Miniature little cabbages. Yes. And I'm also not talking of Bügeleisen-Nacht.
Yes.
For those people who don't know that anecdote, it's when the British had all the bombers, but they were running out of bombs.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually loaded flat irons, basically any scrap iron they could get hold of, into the bombers, knowing that if something like that, a few thousand feet up, opened its bomb bay and all this solid iron rained out, the damage that would do on its own, even if it didn't blow up, would be enormous. So Hamburg did experience a night in which flat irons were basically dropping out of the sky, ripping through roofs and floorboards and whatever. And of course, they couldn't believe it. They had these night bombers. They expected explosives to be raining down, and instead it was irons for ironing.
Oh,
And
yes.
hence the German word for an iron when it comes to ironing clothes is Bügeleisen. And obviously Nacht is just night. So Bügeleisen-Nacht effectively means flat iron night, in which basically the British bombed them with irons.
When these sprouts come raining down like holy manna from above to cleanse the Brussels establishment, is it like the idea of if you drop a penny off the Eiffel Tower, it'll actually be lethal by the time it reaches the floor?
I mean, who knows? I don't know what the acceleration of sprout is in freefall. I mean,
It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same as any other acceleration.
I mean, we might wish to test it, on the day in which the president of the commission gives an outdoor speech in good weather. Who knows? But I just think there might be sort of some humour to be gained in bombing Brussels with sprouts, and then possibly banning the sale of sprouts in the country henceforth.
Well, of course, unless they're Yorkshire sprouts, but the acceleration of a descending sprout is, of course, simply 9.8 meters a second, same as everything else. But terminal velocity, on the other hand, depends whether or not we wait.
But I don't know what the resistance of a sprout as it falls is.
I imagine it's quite small, and if you had enough sprouts, I wonder. I doubt that being hit by one. I imagine it's the same as being hit by a conker, especially if they're frozen. If you were hit by a conker,
no, you wouldn't bomb them with frozen sprouts. I mean,
No, I'm not.
British produce.
They would. When I say frozen, I merely mean from the height at which they're dropped. Britisher, it does get quite cold up there. I've just been linked in Discord by Jury Rigging. Thank you very much. The New Statesman article, Brexit Day is no cause for celebration, the moment of profound national shame.
Well, there you go.
Yes. The UK will tonight leave the most successful experiment in multinational collaboration the world has ever seen. Is that why it's falling apart?
That's if you ignore the D-Day landings, yes.
Yes, I do like that, yes. It's here the day the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, the Brexiteers' long-awaited Independence Day. Apart from a few government-sponsored celebrations, in commas, in Westminster this evening, and a gloating triumphalism of our pernicious tabloids, yes, I believe the tabloids actually did manage in general to put out a good show for the day after, if only in the headlines for the front pages. I detect no great outpouring of national joy over this rupture. It's like, yes, it's because the media suppresses it. There were tens of thousands of people. I was at Parliament Square when we did the countdown for 11 o'clock at night, when it was going to be, not just ratified, but become properly passed through. And the atmosphere was electric. Those of us who were there noted that I was chatting to Sargon, I think it was, about this, and we were agreeing that the mood there was somewhat akin to a bonfire night. Do you know what I mean?
Well, what I would say is that this is a perfect example of things that you are speaking of an electric mood when you were in a square, surrounded by people who were basically of the same frame of mind. Meanwhile, he is saying he can't detect any positive vibes anywhere.
That's because he had to have therapy.
That's because he moves in circles in which everybody thinks exactly the same thing.
Yes, and all of his friends, all of his family, and no doubt his entire office staff have required therapy dogs for the last week straight, so that they can get over the fact that they lost the argument.
Oh, no, they never lose the argument.
Oh,
They
no, I
win
know,
the
that's exactly... I
argument,
pick my words. I pick my words very carefully, Britisher, because they've lost the bloody argument, and they just are in denial. Thank you very much. But I think they know it. I think they know it deep down.
I think you will find that at the last general election, if you count up the percentage of the votes of the parties who were against Brexit, and then you compare it with the percentage of the votes of the parties that were for Brexit, then they won.
And if you exclude Labour because they flip-flopped around the entire issue, then it goes straight back the other way again. I think you will find. Goodness gracious me. But no, so we were down at Parliament Square, and there's because we couldn't have Big Ben bonging out, we had Little Ben, which was this...
Yes. These are, of course, all things I've told people told people about very succinctly in the week that was, which is excellent, by the way, and lots of people enjoy watching it, except for some, illiterates who don't bother.
Look, if you want to shill your retarded cousin's show, Britisher, then be my guest. In fact, no, I won't say that, because that would be an insult to retards.
But by the way, there's one thing that I just want to put out just quickly, because you mentioned Henry VIII before. Perhaps
yes.
That may have been what I was thinking about, and then lost the thread by the time you'd stopped talking. Henry VIII. Have a look at Henry VIII. Have a look at various paintings of Henry VIII.
And his girthiness, yes.
Yes, his girthiness and whatever. But just generally, the look on his face, the beard. And then ask yourself whether you know any Scottish pug fanciers.
I thought you were...
maybe just have a certain, how should we say, likeness. Of course, I have mentioned this to said pug fancier, and he was deeply, gravely insulted, because, of course, this is an English king. But I think anybody who looks at it will kind of see where I'm going here.
Bear with me. I insist that an edit is made immediately. But if I just grab this... Where are you? Henry VIII. Yes, save image. Paste image. And make visible. Yes, absolutely. Just have him and his glorious visage. I'm going to need this image edited stat by anyone with any Photoshop capability to put the Dankula's face on that. I thought at first that you were saying, "Oh, just put on a few pounds, Ivan, and you'll soon be."
No. It's you are definitely Ivan Rebrov. Dankula is Henry VIII. You're not in Henry VIII's territory facially.
Cage fight between Ivan Rebrov and Henry VIII.
When? Yes,
exactly. Get your tickets now, ladies and gentlemen. Um, there's that. What was I? Goodness.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
yes.
that's if you ignore, of course, the death pillow fight between Sargon of Akkad and myself, which was
Oh.
only heavily promoted on Twitter once.
Oh my, that's got to happen. I'll have a chat with him.
This happened round about the time that Andy Warski was having his supposed fight that never happened with the other person who didn't turn up. So, they had a poster and everything. So I decided to make a poster. And we had a bit of a good laugh. But yeah, moving on.
No problem. We were talking about the Brexit celebrations and my experience down at the at Parliament Square. The BBC, for some bizarre reason, decided to report the whole thing as a few hundred people, which was possibly the case at about 2 PM, but certainly not the case around 7 onwards, at which point, when it was easily 1,000 people from 7 o'clock, and easily over 10,000 from where I was standing from 9 o'clock, because you just absolutely could not move. The, what should we call it? Little Ben was bonging out. There were drums, again, very much in the spirit of the kind of season and bonfire night callbacks, as I mentioned before. And everyone was happy. It was funny because we remarked that this was the first time we'd actually turned up to Parliament Square for something of a celebration, as opposed to a protest, where the vibe is decidedly different. But everyone seemed happy. There was a small Remain protest, perhaps 30 people, which came by early afternoon. But they didn't engage at all with the Brexiteer crowd. What they did was they took their 10 or so European Union flags and walked them in front of Westminster. Walked them there, walked them back, and then fobbed off home.
Sounds impressive.
When we got to, we went and got some food and then came back to the raucous crowd. And as we were coming back later in the evening, there was a single solitary EU Remainer who was walking his way down the street with a police escort of 8 men, carrying proudly his European Union flag.
Hang on a moment. He had a police escort of 8 men.
Yes.
But
I said 6 men and 2 women.
But the terrorist who was let out early only had 3 people following him.
Yes.
So effectively, this one person with an EU flag got more police attention than the terrorist.
Yes. Not to mention that, in fact, for the vast majority of the protest, when there were of the celebration, where there were not actually that many people, we were outnumbered by the sheer number of police that turned up who were scared of us, effectively. Absolutely unreal. I'm sorry,
It's more than likely, your thuggish demeanour.
Oh yes, I mean this chap who walked down the street solitaire, with his escort, was getting an awful lot of heckles. You've lost, goodbye, bye, you bye bye, and more. And there was one chap actually who lobbed a can at him. At which point, Froggy, who was there with me, who some of you will recognise from the unpopular opinion streams on the Academic Agents channel, basically he had to walk up to him and be like, just leave it be, man. He's lost the argument. We've got this. It was truly, truly beautiful. I'm just going to put up on screen the image of the Britisher versus Sargon cage match, which is due to happen some point at the Manchester Megadrome, no less. Amazing. February 30th. I like that choice of date. Yes. We need to get you down. Like, are you open at all, Britisher?
I wish to point out that this is TTBMZF approved and MMMABA sanctioned.
Absolutely. Whatever the hell that means.
The undercard is Count Dankula versus a packet of crisps.
he would destroy that packet of crisps. I'm curious if you would be open at all in any capacity to doing a live debate with anyone, Britisher, or a discussion, shall we say?
Oh dear God! I think you know what the answer is.
No.
I treasure my anonymity.
Apart from when it comes to certain Scottishers.
Certain Scottishers, yes.
You're so rude. I'm going to find
That's
you.
that's a long story.
I'm going to hunt you down, and I'm going to find you.
That is a long story that maybe I will be able to explain to you once in private.
I'm sure after the stream, no doubt. Yes. So all I could say about the celebration in Parliament Square was it felt absolutely fantastic. We all had a pint. It was great. I believe we met Poe for the first time there as well, and it was really nice to meet her and Mr. Poe, who has been much maligned in recent times.
Who is named after a river in Italy.
Oh, of course you know that. The academic agent, of course, setting up a fund to rescue him from the clutches of evil Poe. But she turned up in a Britannia cosplay outfit and looked absolutely phenomenal. And we all signed her shield. It was great. So, aside from a few government-sponsored celebrations, in inverted commas, in Westminster this evening, I detected no great outpouring of national joy over this rupture. Why would there be? The latest opinion polls show that half the country still opposes Brexit. You know, it's almost as if public opinion hasn't shifted at all. But despite the efforts of a completely cucked leftist Remainer media, funny that, despite the fact that they have embraced the idea that the BBC is the Brexit bias corporation. It's the camp of the Remainers, and despite all of their efforts, sentiment has not shifted a flat inch, as far as I can tell. Dear.
It is a remarkable one, given what we have seen. I mean, you have had pretty much the establishment in its serried ranks take on this entire issue. I mean, let's not forget this went as high as the Supreme Court at one point. And it was always just simply one outcome. And given that, it is remarkable that they haven't managed to shift public opinion. I mean, my view remains that I think, if anything, public opinion has slightly gone the other way.
I would suggest so, but that's only from my limited...
any kind of major shift. But I think, if anything, it's slightly gone the other way. Because I think, yes, manipulation only works if it's not noticed. The moment that it's blatant and it's openly noticeable, the people resent being... The people resent the attempt to manipulate them. And therefore, yes, you eventually only have the opposite of effect of what you actually hope to achieve. Are you still there, or have we lost you? Because there were some strange buzzing noises coming from your end, not so obvious. And
that's not ideal.
Your microphone has packed up altogether.
Is it still buzzing?
Not now, no.
No, okay. I apologise.
It is now again.
Okay, Joy, it is now again. I will switch microphones briefly. Just give me 1 second.
Well, so here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with the consummate professional, of course, abandoning his own live stream whilst I try and keep this whole thing afloat. How
are we?
I just heard a tutting noise, so I'm assuming
just because you want to keep me afloat, Britisher. It's so nice of you to say. How's this for audio?
You sound much improved.
Oh, marvellous. We'll have to do that. He's pulled the cable, yes. I merely took it out, and that's that. Hopefully, it's fine, and not still buzzing. Very loud, apparently. I will turn it down ever so slightly. Hopefully we are about the same volume now. There we go. I liked the buzzing, says chat. Thanks for you can't please everyone. Just say it. Right, so just going to catch up slightly again. Rory Herbert says, Brexit macht frei.
Stop buzzing.
Good evening, Tailed. How are you doing?
Good evening. I thought I would just join in just in case Britisher was going to be on his own.
Mate, just stay with us. Fantastic. I can see.
By the way,
it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, my friend. I'm just being told that the Admiral Belzadil has done up the Dankula Henry VIII mock-up already for us. So I will add that to the stream at the appropriate juncture. But yes, Rory Herbert says Brexit macht frei means Brexit sets you free. But I don't think we particularly want to be embracing the German to describe the British exit from the European Union, especially given the connotations with the history that they're already trying to pin on us. But appreciate that. People are now saying that I have a Spanish accent now for some reason.
Spanish accent.
Yes, I think they're taking the proverbial, as it were. The Harry Channel has donated $10, thank you very much, and says, unpopular opinion, a small silver lining to the Second World War. Early 20th century German architecture was dreadful. While I would not celebrate the loss of life, I'll happily celebrate the incineration of as many of those ugly buildings as possible. Oh my God.
It's one way of looking at it.
Silver linings and all that. How are you doing, Scottisher?
Scottisher. I thought you'd forgotten what my name was there for a minute, but no, you were just trying to recall a nickname I once had.
Or I could have forgotten your name entirely and just made one up on the spot. Yes,
possibly, yeah. I'm all right. I'm still recovering from a cold, but I have a bit of a voice now, which is good for me and bad for everyone else, because now they get to hear me whittering on endlessly.
Always good to hear from you. Regardless, I would say. Here is
cold is no doubt something that has come up after you've been visiting the Chinese consulate in Edinburgh recently, is it?
Absolutely, yes.
You were dropping off a mysterious package, was that it? Did it contain a vial?
I've not heard it called that before, but
it contained a vial of a hitherto undiscovered strain of a particular virus, and it came out in a Corona bottle, a Corona export bottle. That's what I was trying to get at. But
Winnie the Flu.
Winnie the Flu. Yes, we'll get to coronavirus, I'm sure, at some point this evening. But yeah, as for the Harry Channel, silver linings, I guess. Yes, brutalism and German brutalism not ideal. How did you celebrate Brexit at all, Tailed, or were you laid up in bed?
No, I was working that evening, and when I got in from work around 10:30 or so, I stuck on some live streams just to see what was happening. I was very heartened to see that there were some people in Glasgow who were braving the climate, both meteorologically and politically, to celebrate Brexit happening as well, which was good.
Well, there was the vigil. Did you hear of the vigil?
I heard of the vigil in that segment with Julia Hartley-Brewer. That was in Edinburgh, I believe, which is basically the Scottish equivalent of California. Not meteorologically, but politically. But yeah, I didn't actually see any videos from the vigil or anything like that. But what I did find out, I don't know if you saw that the SNP posted this picture of Brussels, the building in Brussels, and they had a sort of light show thing on the side, and it had Scotland going one way and Europe going the other way, and the O's overlapped, and the O had been changed into a heart. It was very gay
touching
and anti-democratic. But the SNP were touting this as something. Oh, see, Europe loves us and they want us to join back.
Oh, for goodness sake! I saw that. I saw a number of SNP supporters as well, saying "back in 10 minutes," which is like it transpires
that no, this wasn't Europe being nice to us. It was because the SNP had paid Brussels to do this with taxpayers' money. Doing it out of the goodness of their heart. For
you can pay for you can pay for all the goodwill that you can afford.
I don't know if this was intentional, but obviously it was on the side of this building, which was like an office block kind of thing, a part of the European Commission building. I think.
Round the corner,
and there
out
was
of
one
sight.
solitary light on in one of the offices, and they were like, "Oh, look, they're symbolically leaving a light on for us."
Oh, for goodness sake! This is as bad as the thing that got projected on Dover Cliffs. Those of you who don't know, there was a massive projection of a pro-Remain message on Dover Cliffs, and it was basically an interview with two doddery old veterans who had conflated Europe and the European Union. And they said, "Oh, I'm terribly distressed to hear we're leaving leaving Europe after I fought to liberate it or whatever." And you just go, you're like, well, first of all, there's no clue that these two have any idea what the European Union actually is. And secondly, we're not leaving Europe. We are still here. The continent has not shifted.
We're going to be putting up massive sails in the middle of the country.
Oh yes,
we're going to warmer climes.
That's what they call the Northern Powerhouse, isn't it? When they put the main mast in the north.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's massive. The whole island is actually a massive paddle steamer, and it's gonna, we're gonna work our way a bit closer to America.
People are telling me that the projection was fake onto a clip of Dover, I suppose, as opposed to actual cliffs. But I know as well that so many Remainers were sharing it. This is the reason why I trusted it, because this wasn't coming from outraged leavers. This was coming from the Remain camp, where they had that clip at the end where it had the European stars on a blue background. And they all swirl and they head off, and then the last star grows to fill the screen, and it says, "This is our star. Keep it warm and keep it safe for us." And it was just like, oh, you cringy bastards! No, we are not.
That was pretty horrendous. And it's funny because obviously I was about to say there are 27 countries in the EU, now 26, I suppose, but there's not that many stars on the flag, so none of is actually ours.
None of those bottom states count, you see, especially the ones who don't actually meet their dues. You'd be surprised how few countries in Europe actually manage to meet their obligations, especially when it comes to things like net spending on various different European projects. But yeah,
that's why they'll never let an independent Scotland join,
like NATO.
Indeed. Well, NATO is exactly the same. There's a reason Turkey is a member of NATO, and that is because we have missile batteries there. And it's a wall and a place that we can put our missile batteries, not because they have anything else. It's purely strategic value. I can see the number of people putting Max cringe, throwing up faces, and I've just been sick in my mouth in chat. And I can't help but agree, absolutely. My Facebook was absolutely filled with Remain assault, as was my Twitter feed on the day after Brexit legislation and Brexit Day itself. And it was glorious. Did you two have a roll around in the salt fields?
Yes. I was doing much trolling and basically just posting that GIF from the Patriot. The red coat looking smug, laughing.
Amazing. I'm not sure if it's.
I just posted that to everybody.
But you'll forgive me if that's not really an option I have.
Go. Oh, what? Rolling around in salt fields?
No. Posting the smug red coat from the Patriot.
That's just you replying to any tweet, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, my avatar is already that triggering that if I would add that, I think there might be a nuclear war.
Well,
all right. I think you might be just gently overestimating your influence there, Britisher. But good.
And also the influence.
What?
Of Twitter.
Good efforts there.
It was quite funny though, because I was obviously mostly trolling SNP followers.
Yes,
and it was great because especially when I told them that I support in principle Scottish independence, because they just didn't believe me, and they were like, "Oh, aye, that's fucking right," and just like they just went mental at me, and I went, "Yeah, because independence means not being, slaves of a different master," and they just didn't like that at all. They went, "Oh, but look at you, you're posting all these memes." Like, memes are, tell you exactly what people's politics are and aren't just jokes.
I like that the Guardian's cryptic crossword, the top and bottom lines read "bollocks to Brexit."
Yes, I saw that. You tweeted that one out.
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't see that one, but that is fucking petty.
That is petty, yeah. We had someone saying, "For those contemplating a patriotic Brexit Sunday roast, please remember, your roast beef was domesticated in Mesopotamia, your potatoes originated in South America, and your Brussels sprouts, well." And it was just like...
Brexit sprouts.
Sorry? Brexit sprouts,
Sprouts from no one.
I said,
are you trying to tell us that message said that your British things are not British?
Yes, around that region. I maintain that my potatoes will be seasoned with the salt of Remainer tears for years to come at this rate. But there were a couple of other things. I'm hoping that I could see them, but no, I think it's a fake tweet. Someone put Owen Jones had tweeted out, "I hope all you gammons rot in hell for this." And here's the one I was looking for, which is England saying, "Ain't independent swell, Scotland," and a Scottish avatar saying, "It'd be nice, England." And it's just like, it's almost as if the difference in the acting of our nations was contingent on the differing result of a vote or something. Funny that. I
have no comment on that one.
Not at all. If the Scots had voted for independence, fair play to them. I would be sad to see them go, but democratic rights and all that. But it's just like this, the salt. Although at the moment I got into an argument with someone who was saying that the SNP were elected in this last election with a mandate for a second referendum, so it has to happen now. Democracy was standing according to your own principles.
Date, you bigot.
Sorry?
It's a person date, not a mandate.
Oh, I see. Yes, I'm terribly sorry. I fuck off. The Lil Aotearoa says has worked out the terminal velocity of a Brussels sprout for us. The terminal velocity of a Brussels sprout.
Oh yes, this is what we needed.
Would be 37.5985 meters per second if it had a mass of 10 grams. A CSA of 184.99 and a drag coefficient of 0.5. So
yes, at that speed, would it be able to punch through sheet steel or not?
That's the question. Just let us know in regular chat.
Is that being pulled by a laden swallower?
Yes. Well, it depends if it's a European swallow or an African swallow. At the end of the day.
An African migrant swallow.
It's an African swallow, but it identifies as a European.
It's got a European passport already.
DRT is King says, "Happy Brexit, rule Britannia, have fun being free." Well, I'm very much looking forward to the developments of the next few years, and I'm sure my co-hosts here are equally excited, if perhaps a little more reserved than I am this evening. DRT is King also says, "Who's next? The Dutch, Polish, the French, or the Italians?" Thoughts, panel?
Oh, I saw there was a poll today. Apparently 51% of Dutch people are in favour of leaving the European Union. But what with people like Nicola Sturgeon looking at a poll of 1,093 people about Scottish independence, and that being 51% in favour of independence, she went, "Oh, see, we're mostly in favour of independence now." That was 1,000 people. So I'll take it with a pinch of salt, but I would like to see the Netherlands go next.
I think it really all boils down to where the opportunity avails itself. I mean, remember, the only reason we are here is because Dave Cameron called a referendum. And the only reason that happened was because there was a Nigel Farage that was terrifying the living daylights out of him. So, in a way, what the popular sentiment at any given time might be on the ground, and we all know that tends to shift, if you know what I mean, but it always depends on whether the opportunity actually avails, because if the entire political establishment simply just goes, this is not going to happen, we are simply not going to put it to the people, then it doesn't really matter what the people think.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? So, therefore, it's very, very difficult to call this as in which might be the next country, because it's not really a question of where is the public sentiment indicating that the public will might be there. It's more a matter of where would the system allow for it to occur.
Yes. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. And it all depends whether or not Guy Verhofstadt gets his dream of no more opt-outs going forward. Although presumably that would require masses of votes across masses of nations, and you would clearly see quite how small the European Union might shrink quite
I can
rapidly.
really see Hungary and Poland in the present mood really embracing that.
Yes, just anything going. Since Gowan's chimed in with Denmark next, by the gods, Denmark next. Is Denmark in the European Union? I forget.
Oh yes, they are. Yes.
Am I? Yeah.
In fact, it's because of the Danes that the British are not really the first to leave the European Union.
Right.
Because you see, the Danes oversee the territory of Greenland. And Greenland left the European Union.
I apologise for my ignorance there, fellow.
So they are theoretically still owned by the Danes. I mean, that's why Trump was so keen on buying it from the Danes recently. But yes, they effectively negotiated a way out of the EU. The reason that doesn't really set a precedent for something like Britain leaving the EU is because the only thing one was really interested in when it came to Greenland leaving the EU was fishing rights. So there was really only, okay, you've got your territorial waters, thank you very much, goodbye. Given that there isn't really any industry in Greenland, it's not as if there was a complex trade deal to negotiate.
No, I can understand that. Where were we? We were still on the... we will get on to Nish Kumar, but I just want to keep going through this New Statesman article about why Britain hates itself or something.
I didn't even realise we were doing an article.
Oh, right. No. This is the article, Brexit Day is a moment of profound national shame, from the New Statesman. And we're just doing. I'm just reading excerpts from it, pretty much. Apparently, the latest opinion poll shows half the country still opposes Brexit. Moreover, the will of the people, again in inverted commas, manifestly excludes the peoples of Scotland, Northern Ireland, London, and metropolitan England. Aye, the cities were snubbed. That's what I would say.
Well, so, as a person from Scotland, Tail Feature, do you feel snubbed? Do you feel ignored? Do you feel hard done by at the moment?
Oh, I feel elated.
You sound elated.
I'm just tired now from all the elation after since Friday.
Are you saying there is such a thing as too much elation?
Well, I just get tired winning all the time. I mean, I whenever someone says, oh well, this part of the UK was snubbed, I went, you do realise that the country is the United Kingdom, and then there are regions within that.
Yeah.
London, Scotland, Northern Ireland included. You can't just go, well, this bit feels hard done by. That's not how democracy works. Sorry.
Yes, it's almost as if there are measures in place to prevent it. And in fact, if we decided to go by the already deeply undemocratic first-past-the-post system that they're always decrying, then in fact it would have been 2/3 in favour of Brexit anyway. So no matter which way you cut the cake, it ends up being in favour of Brexit.
Well, that's why there was such a decisive decision. I mean, it's a decisive decision. I apologize.
You
But
should.
that's
You
why, yes,
disgust me.
that's why it was so clear when it came to the general election. That said, Brexit was not the only thing that people were voting about, but the fact that it broke down into a majority of constituencies that were pro-Brexit, of course, helped the Conservatives a huge amount.
Mm.
And I would just like to remind everybody of the fact there are boundary changes coming up.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
Oh, yes. So one thinks that by the time of the next election, so if you give it 5 years, the boundary changes of the constituencies will have been put in place. Those boundary changes will favour the Conservatives.
Yes.
This is not, of course, Owen Jones is speaking of gerrymandering and whatever. This is complete nonsense. What it actually is that the moment you have got some completely inflated constituencies and others that are sort of much too small. And therefore, at the moment, actually, it favours the Labour Party.
Yeah.
So,
because it was done that way, Blair redrew them, didn't he?
Yeah. One needs to rebalance it. To be fair, I don't think this goes back to Tony Blair. But it's just simply something due to population shifts and whatever. It needs to be rebalanced, and it will therefore, wait for this, it will swing another 10 constituencies.
Yeah.
Which, of course, if you take 10 from one side and add them to the other side, it makes a difference of 20. Which means that at present counting, with Boris obviously at the moment having an 80-seat majority, come the next election, he will theoretically have a 100-seat majority.
Indeed, which is not, of course, to say, because if the constituencies which have swung his way in this election, purely for the first time in some of them for their entire history as a constituency, if he manages to hold on to those by doing what they want them to do and fundamentally changing the environment over there, the terrain, then there's nothing to stop a number of other very, very now marginal seats, which used to have majority votes in their area of upwards of 3,000 plus, which have gone down now to triple, sometimes double figures. Then the Labour is in real tough spot for next time as well. Yes. I have to say.
You said that we were redrawing boundaries. I thought you meant just immediately rebuilding Hadrian's Wall.
You'd like that, wouldn't you? That would move you towards your Scottish independence or your vision.
Well, of course, the reason Tailed Feature would love that is not only would it, sort of hint towards Scottish independence, but it would, of course, immediately allow Scotland to grow by about, 20%? Something like that.
Absolutely, it would, yeah.
Because Hadrian's Wall
is a little bit south there, isn't it?
Yes, the Hadrian's Wall, for all the Americans listening, is nowhere near the Scottish border.
Yes, we spent a lot of time fighting wars over that little bit of land.
That's why it's called the debatable land.
Yes.
The
border reavers.
But as we can see on the map, we can establish who won that debate.
Heron's War in chat is asking you, Tailed, if there was another Scottish referendum, how would you vote now?
Well, this is the interesting thing. I mean, in principle, I'm still in favour of Scottish independence, but if there was a vote tomorrow, I would absolutely vote to remain part of the UK, because as it stands at the moment, we have no chance of surviving on our own, and I don't want to rejoin the EU.
And you're currently run by scommunists.
Quite. So, yeah, and until there is a decent movement, a decent party that appears with a good plan for an independent Scotland's economy and all that kind of stuff, rather than just what the SNP want, I'm not going to vote yes. But I don't think there should be another independence referendum for quite some time anyway. The whole once in a generation thing.
At the time, wasn't it? They said 14 years, didn't they, last time?
Well, that is probably the average age of teen pregnancy in this country, anyway. So,
Well, that's more than likely the age at which they wish people to be able to vote SNP by now.
Probably, yeah. I mean, we do for Holyrood elections. Yeah, the voting age is 16. So. Yes, that's yes. And obviously, we've seen recently that the SNP want to introduce Scottish visas. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh my,
yes,
no,
we did.
I didn't. But go on.
You mean you haven't watched my video on it?
Look! I've been busy, guys. I've been really busy.
Busy celebrating Brexit. Fair enough.
Oh dear.
But yeah, the SNP are just awful, and they have complete hegemony over everything. I know the current supporters that don't like the SNP, as in the independent supporters who don't like the SNP, just say, "Oh, just vote for someone else when we get independence." Like there is no one else. I mean, who have you got? You've got branches of the Labour Party, branches of the Tories, and the Green Party.
Can I
and
ask,
then you've got the Scottish Libertarian Party, who are three men and a dog kind of thing. So
how do you explain this complete and utter hegemony that has come about by the SNP?
Well, remember, most elections for the past, 20, 30 years have been won, in inverted commas, won by none of the above. Our voter turnout is really low compared to the rest of the UK, and I think that's why. It's you've got the rabid SNP supporters, and then you've got the apathetic masses who just think, well, there's no point because everyone's shit anyway. It's even the same for the EU referendum. I think the turnout in Scotland was the lowest across the whole UK. It was something like 67%, whereas most places were 78 and higher. So yeah, I think it's just an apathetic voting base, or just no. In fact, no, I'm not going to go into. I was going to say something rather disparaging about my own people, so I won't.
Do you think that the SNP have somehow managed to monopolize patriotism?
Well, I think there's a lack of patriotism. I mean, I know they claim that they are patriots. Well, they're nationalists, but they want to get rid of the word nationalism from the name. But they're the ones that are have got all the all the saltires flying and the Braveheart face paint and all this kind of stuff. Absolute cringe sort of people. That if that's patriotism, then I don't know. You can do all that, but it doesn't change the fact that they want to rejoin the EU, which isn't patriotic, which isn't nationalistic, which isn't independence. So
I fully see where you're coming from there, but I just mean, given that they are effectively the party, as far as Scotland is concerned, of the independence movement, have they in a way managed to create an environment in which one is free to challenge the patriotism of anybody who doesn't want independence? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. That is true to an extent, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I mean, they're not the only pro-independence party, but I mean, obviously they're by far the largest and most vocal about it. I don't know. That's good. That's a good question, actually.
Because somehow one has to be, there must be some rationale as to why they are where they are. Because at the moment they're pretty much monopolizing politics in Scotland. Now, I understand what you mean with they have this sort of really pent up, fired up, almost fanatical base, whereas the other parties seem to have kind of lost that. So once upon a time, when Scotland was completely red, obviously that fervour was there in the grassroots Labour movement, but that seems to have kind of withered. So you've got, it's almost as if you've got the kind of religious fanatics against the agnostics, where no one on the side of the agnostics can really muster that much enthusiasm.
Well, I mean, I think part of the thing is obviously in the 80s, Thatcher killed the Tory party in Scotland.
Mm-hmm. Undoubtedly.
And then during the independence referendum, Labour committed suicide with their stances. So, and there are plenty of people who go, well, I'm not fucking voting SNP, so who is there left to vote for?
Yeah. I mean, was it really the independence movement, the independence referendum, or was it Blair? Because I have a suspicion that just as Thatcher poisoned the Tory brand north of the border, so too did Blair, in a way, poison the Labour brand north of the border.
I suppose so, but then the SNP
took longer
just
to kind of filter through, and then yes, that the SNP effectively then became the strange heirs of this situation.
Yeah.
I've always
left party.
I've always found the course they took bizarre, because sort of during the 80s and whatever, they were still known as the Tartan Tories.
Exactly.
And then they somehow decided to become, we're more progressive than the progressives. We're going to outflank Labour on the left. And you just go, how did that happen? What? How does anybody try and explain the sort of intellectual political journey that the SNP went on, and in any way sell that as a consistent position? But yeah, I find it really curious, and that's why I'm sort of keen to find, what is it that drove the love affair is perhaps the wrong term, but you understand what I mean, that the love affair of the Scots with the SNP. And that's why I'm wondering whether somewhere the fact of the fear of not being patriotic in Scotland may be the equivalent of, being accused of being a racist or a Nazi on Twitter, if you know what I mean. That one feels almost one must do one's duty. So that there would almost be something like the patriotism card in Scotland as a political trump, if you know what I mean.
Well, I suppose so, because if anyone says no, I'm against independence, or I'm not in favour of independence, they're immediately referred to as a Westminster bootlicker,
and perhaps a poodle of the English.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, they still. If anyone comes out with that, you as soon as they see a Union Jack, they still refer to it as the butcher's apron and all that.
Yes, I've heard that. Yes, that's. Yeah. I find that just a bizarre. I find it a bizarre thing. It's also a strange inversion of history, given that some of the things that happened north of the border may have happened under the Union Jack, but they were very often actually done by Scotsmen against other Scotsmen. Yeah,
and with the Empire, the was it the militia that was the British militia was overwhelming or disproportionately Scottish troops.
The Scots were foremost in the Empire. I mean, not only when it comes to the troops and whatever, also, I mean, what is it? The Black Watch and sort of famous troops, but also when it comes to governors, the amount of Scottish governors. Yes, the administration of the British Empire. The Scots sort of were sort of overrepresented therein. I think also viceroyals of India and things like that. So we're not just sort of saying that we're not talking the Scots were in certain areas, but the top ranks were all reserved for the English. Not at all. So when it comes to this thing about the butcher's apron and things like that, you just think, I'm sorry, but it's a strange way of interpreting history from a Scottish perspective.
Which is fine, because for quite some time now, I've been working on and off on a script for a video to do with this very subject, basically Scotland's place in the Empire, and instead of seeing it through a lens of the English did all the bad things and the Scottish were just as oppressed as the rest of the colonies and all that kind of nonsense that that gets touted all the time. Although having said that, there are, shall we say, people of foreign extraction within Scotland and academia and everything that say that Scotland should apologise for colonialism and stuff as well. So it's a very it's a very confused message, especially from the likes of the SNP, who are
we will
both oppressed and oppressors at the same time.
We will gladly apologise for the oppression of India and whatever once they deliver their railway back to us on boats and everything.
Piece by piece,
their
indeed.
universities and everything, piece by piece, their government buildings, the whole thing, and then we'll apologise.
And I'll also pay us back for all the tea that we planted there. That's pretty much what they're
and of course, they also have to abandon the English language. So no more, hello, my name is Brian.
Yeah, shut down all their call centers.
Since Gowan says, who has a railroad nearby? Did you catch which model that was?
Like a car to me. But...
I think, yes, he's referring to the fact that, unfortunately, the microphone I'm using has absolutely no noise filter, and I do live next to a road, which unfortunately means that we get a little bit of background noise in there. But yes, just to bring us
sort of... when your Saudi Arabian neighbours are driving their Ferraris and Lamborghinis at speed,
I must apologise. I don't make these things about these streams. It's solely about Scotland. But as soon as I appear, that's what the other people start asking me things about Scotland.
It's fine. You've got to give due course to the third world tales. From time to time.
Did you? By the way, as the resident Scot here, did you notice Boris Johnson complaining that we can't export haggis to the United States of America?
I didn't see that, no, but I know that to be true. That's something to do with the US.
Yeah, I think he had the US ambassador there when he was giving his speech today about Brexit, and he was talking about free trade and how we would be able to export this and that. And of course, he also touched on Scottish whiskey. I mean, how could he miss it?
And shortbread.
Then he couldn't help but kind of throw a glance to the US ambassador and mention that until this day we can't export haggis to the United States of America for some unfathomable reason.
Should probably point out to the listeners that we can't export it. It's not because we've got loads of it waiting and the Americans are like, you know what, I'll just pass. It's not that. It's genuinely, it's against the law to import offal of animals into America, so they can't get it from Canada either. So it's not just Scotland. So they have to use their own sheep. They have to use their own sheep hearts, lungs, and liver and stomach to make their own haggis. And obviously, it's just not going to be the same, is it?
I see. I've just had a message from Count Dankula regarding the Henry VIII image that was created for us by General Belsdale, and I sent it along with him. I sent it to him along with the message that we noticed a resemblance. You're clearly an English sleeper agent. I knew it. To which he replied, "You must keep my darkest secret." So I'm asking all of the 380 viewers who are here to proudly keep the Dankula secret that he is in fact an English sleeper agent.
As I said earlier in the stream, this sort of originated on my once upon a time long ago, and when I broached this subject to Count Dankula, he threatened me with lawyers. to which I simply responded, "Oh, well, no skin off my back, given your success in the courts."
I was going to say, he's not exactly had the best track record, has he?
To which point he just went, "Okay, yeah, fair enough."
Let me see.
But then that specifically was regarding the Henry VIII Anne Boleyn Sue Hulk Count Dankula wedding picture comparison.
Ah, I see. Yes, I've seen that one. Matchstick says, full haggis embargo. There you go. That's that. And
embargo, yes.
yes, and Rory Herbert says, did Britisher enjoy the Super Bowl twerking?
Ah, well, here we are. Yes, the outrage regarding the Super Bowl. To be honest, not being at all interested in American football.
I thought you were going to say in American women.
I didn't really watch the Super Bowl, so all I got were some snippets that were floating around on Twitter. And this was, what is it, Shakira and
J-Lo.
what's she called? J-Lo. Jennifer Lopez, I believe.
Jennifer Lopez.
So these are effectively Latina women who have built much of their fame really on their looks rather than on their ability to sing. I mean, off the top of your head, how many hits of theirs can you recount? So when you then give them the biggest audience of their lives, they will seek to fall back on their strengths, right?
By
Saw that
strengths.
conversation between you and Shinobi.
So essentially, yes.
Ample assets, as it were. Is that
yes, precisely. Yes. So in a way, you know what to expect, and at the same time, there was also something, wasn't there, about culture and whatever. And I said, well, this is culture. I mean,
it's ass, but it's culture.
Well, it's not high culture. It's not high culture.
No.
But it's culture. So basically, if you look at something like that, you can say, okay, dancing to Latino rhythms and whatever, combined with the carnivals that they have all around South America and the Caribbean.
Yes.
That's where this originates from. Now, obviously, you then get a heightened version of this, with the camera being always in the right place to catch it for greatest impact.
Nicholas Daly in chat does point out that Shakira can play 6 different instruments.
Well, so what? It's as I say, I'm still waiting for her great contribution to Western popular music. So as such, I think that it's almost like they put out bait and the moralists took it, if you know what I mean.
Fair enough. The DRT is King says, I support free trade for haggis. Haggis is hard to get. So thanks for that.
I mean, I would just like to add, when it came to the Shakira J-Lo thing,
yes,
I saw one piece where I sort of thought, oh dear God, they're going a bit Oscar speech, Grammy acceptance speech here, Golden Globes, where obviously with them being South American or Latin American at least in origin, there seemed to be a touch of we're all people, we're all Americans, yada yada, which I was wondering, was that a dig at, we shouldn't build any walls and everybody should be allowed to come in?
Oh, maybe. Who knows?
And I think that if I were a right winger, I think that would be more the thing that would rub me up the wrong way, rather than them shaking their bottoms at the camera.
I really have no opinion on it. I haven't seen a clip. I'm not that interested, to be perfectly honest, in either of them. So that's that. Welcome back, Tail.
I have no idea what happened there. Everything
died.
Everything is still running fine, except for Discord and YouTube.
Fair enough.
For a moment there, you thought you were trying to get into my live stream software, did you?
Gentlemen.
Well, it did seem a bit like that, yes. It's obviously that my haggis-powered internet.
Well, it's only got 3 legs, hasn't it?
So rather than having
no, it's got 4, but 2 are shorter than the other 2 on one side.
So rather than some wires connected to a potato, you've got wires connected to a haggis, have you?
I'm burning haggai.
I'm going to move us on. We've only got about 15 minutes left, so I want to get us on to the last story of the evening, which is, of course, Nish Kumar deciding to go on this. I hadn't realised that it was a CBBC broadcast, but it turns out it is Horrible History's CBBC clip show in order to say that actually there's nothing very British about the British.
And when was that published?
I have no idea. Do tell.
Brexit Day.
Oh yes, on Brexit Day. I thought you were going to wow me with the idea that it was released somewhat like 3 years ago or something, and therefore,
Yeah, so on Brexit Day, CBBC puts out what seemed spiteful, nasty tweet at the British, and even Nish Kumar even opens it with, "Oh, Britain is now going to go it alone." His really sarky "Go Britain," and then we're told that nothing that we thought was British is British anyhow, and just stole everything.
Yes, they don't mention any of the British inventions or great leaps forward that. As opposed to the Great Leap Forward, which is something entirely different. Great leaps forward in technology and thinking and philosophy that Britain pioneered. They don't mention things like, oh, well, we created the submarine, for instance, which is obviously one of our big achievements alongside general steam-powered devices and water pumps and that sort of thing, if you're going to go through the real basics. I mean, there's easily 400, 500, 600 years of about 400 years of industrial revolution technology that
they touch on cotton, don't they?
Oh yes, with clearly the slaves were involved with that. Yes.
Yeah. So cotton came from where the slaves were picking it. Yes.
Yes.
But it was our mills that were spinning it, right?
Yes, the mills we invented, and we did do a good job.
They bizarrely don't get mentioned.
No, and we managed to do a good job of actually, shall we say, screwing our own industries out of all that cotton at some point, didn't we? When we freed the slaves. Yes, there was some misinformation in there about Queen Victoria as well, wasn't there? Something about like her being complicit in the slave trade or something like that, even though the slave trade ended before her reign officially took hold. Even if it took another 4 or 5 years for that to expand out to the colonies. Wasn't that right?
I honestly don't know exactly about the timeline there, but yes, it just seemed nasty. It seemed mean-spirited. It seemed to me as though someone at the BBC was throwing a tantrum because of Brexit.
Yes, nobody mentions the fact that Beijing is forever grateful to us, because
Peking.
No, Beijing. You know the saying, don't you, that there are 9 million bicycles in Beijing. Who invented the bicycle? The British.
Well, we invented the bicycle as a sort of how should we? I don't know. It wasn't the bicycle. It was something pegged, wasn't it? You had to walk it, even though you were on wheels.
Kirkpatrick.
The bicycle, as we know it, is a French creation.
Oh, fine. Don't loathe to give anything to the French.
But
I know.
I think there was some Scot who created something.
Yeah, Kirkpatrick Macmillan. Yes.
But as such, when it comes to the bicycle as we know it, that has to be credited to the French.
Oof.
I mean, no,
British. Are you just you continental traitor? You.
Oh yeah, utter betrayal. No, I find it quite necessary to kind of attribute credit to where credit is due, because then it becomes clear just what for astonishing contribution the British as a whole actually made. Because across the board, it is quite remarkable how much the British, particularly during the Victorian era, produced.
Do we dare mention, despite his links to eugenics, Francis Galton and his contributions to forensic science and stuff like that?
Well, as I say, it's across the field. It's not just in
No.
engineering, Brunel and things like that, but it's across the board. In all fields, you will see progress being made, and it largely emanating from Britain. And
Yes. Even
therefore,
something.
yes, it's true that the German Benz, he came up with the first motor car, and so on. And I'm quite happy to attribute those things. But if you look at the sort of the totality of it, that's when you suddenly realize, oh dear God, the British were busy around.
I mean, if you could. I mean, I don't forgive them, but you could forgive them for some of the stuff which is historically questionable. If you're going to go and say, "Oh, the French invented the bicycle," but like something as recent as like the jet engine, something that's in use all the time.
Yeah.
And Sir Frank Whittle, who invented the jet engine, right? Like, these are not small technological leaps, as it were.
Oh, I mean, when it comes to sort of flight, the British and the French actually both have quite an astonishing record, because we like to think of the Wright brothers and then just forget everything else. But when it comes to gliders, when it comes to powered flight, when it comes to all sorts of things, you've got the British, the French, the British, the French, the British, the French, and then at some point, some bicycle repairman at Kitty Hawk.
Yeah.
And because that was the one where the first human on a heavier than air construction was, powered.
Yeah.
That's when we say, okay, that's a recognizable aircraft. But for example, there was the first airship to travel powered, the first powered airship. It was powered by a steam engine, and it flew over Paris.
Wow.
And obviously, it was a Frenchman,
Yeah.
And you sort of think, so somebody actually had a steam engine on something that was lighter than air, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
You sort of think, well, that's quite a push. But I think also, didn't Britain also build a model plane that was also powered by a miniature steam engine, I believe?
I cannot remember.
Yeah, there's really sort of bizarre sort of things that you sort of that take you by surprise. I think there's even a Welsh claim of somebody to have built some kind of hybrid, balloon / airship / aircraft,
Right.
that might actually have had the claim of a heavier than air machine. But it's that badly there is that little sort of documentation about it that it's kind of almost semi-mythical. But somebody in Wales built something bizarre that might actually hold the record ahead of the Wright brothers. But no, there was beautiful examples. I think there was a glider that some British lord built. And obviously, his being aristocratic, he didn't deem it necessary for himself to fly the machine. No. His butler was seconded for that. At which point, after the butler had taken off at the top of the hill, glided down, and then sort of crash landed at the bottom and made his way back to the Lord, he decided that this might be the time in which he finds it appropriate to quit his position.
Britisher, I'm going to stop you there. Clearly, we have the greatest invention that can be credited to the British, and in fact, Tailed, you'll be happy to hear it's a Scottish invention. Scotland is credited with the invention of rain, which is still used worldwide to this day. I like that one. Thank you, General Lowe.
No. I think we need to be more precise here. Rain is not at all a British invention.
No.
But horizontal rain is definitely a Scottish contribution.
Amazing. Any thoughts there, Tailed? Oh, he appears to have left us, so I don't know what's going on there. We'll maybe he'll come back.
Yes, so basically, it is rain that travels in a horizontal direction, thus it never actually reaches the floor.
Yes, I was never questioning what horizontal rain was.
If ever it gets to the floor, it's after it's hit you bodily.
Indeed.
And then runs down along your person to the ground. That's But I think anybody who has experienced Scottish bad weather will know what I'm talking about.
Mr. Gently Benevolent has chimed in to my defence and to attack you, Britisher, and says there's a lot of pro-French. There's a lot of pro-French propaganda going on here. Has someone hacked into Britisher's tank and adjusted his settings? Yes, I know that I shouldn't have fed you those croissant crumbs this morning, Britisher.
Well, you see, I don't refer to them as croissant. I refer to them as kipfeln.
What in the hell? Explain.
Well, the history of the croissant is the siege of Vienna by the Turks. And, of course, the siege was lifted. The Turks had to withdraw. They were beaten. I believe this one actually goes back to that famous charge of the winged hussars from Poland. So the largest, it's believed to be the largest cavalry charge of all times. That's if you don't count Manzikert and things like that.
Right.
But, of course, the Turks are beaten back, and they have to abandon their camp outside Vienna. So, of course, what do the troops, and particularly also the Viennese, do? They pick through the remainder of the Turkish camp. What do they find? Sacks and sacks of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Something they weren't familiar with.
Yeah.
And you may have heard of the Viennese coffee house.
Right.
Well, now you know how that came about.
Amazing.
But in order to celebrate the victory over the Turks, a Viennese baker created the croissant. Because if you think of it, it's shaped like a crescent moon,
yes.
Which is, of course, on the Turkish flag.
Indeed.
So, in a way, to celebrate the victory of the Turks, one was eating the crescent moon.
Amazing.
But the Austrian word for croissant is Kipfeln, because the Austrians have a habit of having words that have a lot of consonants and no vowels in them.
And there we are. The Britisher has provided unto you an anecdote, you dear audience.
I just hope I've got the right siege. It's definitely the Siege of Vienna, but I hope it's that one and not some later thing. But yeah, anyhow.
Irrespective, if it was incorrect, Britisher, it was still an amusing yarn. Thank you so much for sharing it. I believe, unfortunately, it is time to bring the stream to a close. But thank you very, very much for joining me this evening, Britisher. Thank you very much to Tailed Feature, who is unfortunately not here to be able to respond to.
Well, he's more than likely trying to fend off the angry torch and pitchfork mob that has gathered outside his house once they heard him talk about the SNP and he's not willing to.
Yes.
He's not being willing to vote for independence.
With their torches burning bright with the yellow flame of the Scottish independence. Yes. So I will see you all on the next Fake Accents Unite, but before then, of course, hoping to get potentially one video out this week, we will also be making a return to the Atrocity Project streams. If you're familiar with that, that is where we are attempting to hunt down and go through materials related to the Grooming Gang scandal in order to put together something comprehensive and potentially uncover some unique investigative points. If you'd like to continue to support this channel, thank you very much to all our super chatters who've come in. Thank you very much to the people who have joined the channel as a member. There are 3 different tiers on there. If you click that button, it would be very much appreciated. Otherwise, you can support this show and the channel via Patreon, PayPal, or Subscribestar. Thank you very much to everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. Take care.
Toodle pip.